In this video, I want to talk to you about why the desire to be logical may not be serving you when it comes to creating the life that you desire. I hear a lot of people talk about being more logical, being less emotional, and somehow pitting these parts of themselves, the part that is logical and the part that is emotional, against each other, as if they need to choose between the two. And what I want to present to you today is that the best way to move towards any sort of outcome that you want is by partnering with not just your emotional side, not just your logical side, but all the different parts of yourself. And specifically today, I want to talk about the fact that there are three distinct parts of your brain, and all three of those parts have a specific role and a specific purpose in your life, and that listening to only one of them or only two of them and shutting down the others will mean missing out on valuable information that you need to get to where it is that you are going in life. All right, so let's briefly talk about these three parts and their motivation. Now, number one, you have your lizard brain. Okay, this is kind of deep brainstem part of your brain, and it is the most primitive part of the brain. It's the most primal, and it's really focused solely on your safety. Okay, now that's a simplification. All of this is going to be a simplification of a organ within the body that's very complex. But to know that this part of the brain, really, that is its primary concern. It is concerned with keeping you alive. It's concerned with looking at the world and deciding what is safe, what is unsafe, what do we need to do to survive. Okay, and that's always going to be its motivation. Then we have sort of like midbrain area. This is our mammalian brain. The limbic brain is part of this. And this is the part of the brain that is really emotional. It's emotions and memories primarily. Okay, and this is what drives it. It's driven by what feels good and these emotional connections. And it's always going to be focused on what feels good or what feels bad. Right. And that also is information. And the interesting thing about this is while there are certain safety things that are universal, a lot of this is very personal, and we get a lot of personalized information about who you are and what you want and how you function best in the world from this part of the brain. And then we have our neocortex, and people call this the upstairs brain. This is our thinking brain. A lot of times I just refer to it as the thinking brain, but this is where that logical thought, that planning, that sort of reasoning comes into play. And all of these parts of the brain are valuable. We need all of them. And that's why we have all of them. They all play a specific role. And whenever we try to look at them and pit them against each other and say, okay, well, I've decided that this one isn't valuable, so I'm only going to listen to this. I'm not going to listen to either of these. I'm going to just listen to this. You're only coming away with 1/3 of the information that you need to move forward in life in a way that is healthy. And the main thing that I want you guys to know, like the key point of this, is that all three of these parts of your brain are on the same team. They're on your team. They are on team your well-being. And the best way to approach this is as a partnership. Now, if you have a business, okay, if we have people in business who are partners, what we're talking about in partnership is that we have multiple parties and they have come together and they are working together for a mutually agreed upon outcome goal. Okay, everybody's working towards the same outcome. Now, but within that business, people may play different roles. Okay, and because they have different roles and they have different strengths and they have different jobs within that partnership, at any given meeting, we may have very different opinions. Okay, so here's a decision we're making. Okay, are we doing this or this? And all of the parties may have differing opinions on what the best way to move forward is, because they're bringing their unique perspective. They're bringing their experience. They're bringing their information. They're bringing the lens through which they see the world. And what one person knows and understands is going to be different from the information that another person knows and understands. And that is valuable. Okay, that is part of the benefit and the beauty of bringing a team together, is that we don't just make decisions based on one person's perspective, but we get to glean, this person's entire lifetime of knowledge and perspective, and this person's lifetime of knowledge and perspective, and this person's lifetime of knowledge and perspective. And we get to bring all of it to the table and sort through it and then decide what the best way forward is based on all of that. So in the meeting itself, it may look like disagreement. Okay, it may look like one person says do this and one person says do the opposite. And yet, everybody is actually working towards the same outcome goal. Everybody wants the same thing. Everybody's on the same team. They're just figuring out what is the best way to get there. And that is exactly what you're going to find happening within your brain. And when we don't understand that, we're like, well, part of me feels this and part of me feels this, and we think that's a problem. That's when we want to shut one part down. And that's when we're listening to society to tell us, okay, well, if my emotions say one thing and logic says another, which do I listen to? Right? But that's never the point. The point is that we want to listen to all of it, take it all as information, understand that every single part of your brain is on the same team. It's on team your well-being. All these parts of your brain have the same ultimate goal in mind, which is your well-being. And when we can see that as a partnership, and we can come to be in partnership with all these parts of the brain, listen to all of them, we are much more likely to get where we're going. Okay. So let's talk about what happens if we do this and if we don't. Okay, so looking at the lizard brain that's concerned with safety. Now, this is important because whenever we are moving forward in life, we have to acknowledge the reality that we have a nervous system. You have a nervous system. I have a nervous system. And when we deny that that is true, we get in trouble. Okay, because we have had experiences. We are born with a certain window of tolerance for stress. This has to do with factors that happened before we were born, how much cortisol was pumping through our mother's system whenever we were in utero, what trauma we've experienced. It creates a certain level of tolerance of what we can actually handle before we move outside of our window and end up either in hyperarousal or hypoarousal in a place that is not grounded and able to function properly. And if we are not listening to that information, we end up outside of our window of tolerance. And this is when we're going down the path to burnout, to chronic illness, to chronic pain, to all kinds of things within our system that are not helpful. You cannot disregard this. You cannot deny the fact that you actually have a nervous system. And all of this is meant for your safety. Okay, so we have to be able to acknowledge it. We have to be able to work with it so that we can move forward towards things in a healthy way that's within our actual capacity. But we also cannot let this part of our brain lead by itself, because what we know about when it comes to safety in the lizard brain is that for every person's brain, what it believes is that if it's familiar, it's safe. And if it's unfamiliar, it's probably unsafe, right? Because like we don't know what that is. So if we let our lizard brain be fully in charge and we don't listen to either of this, just what the lizard brain says, it's always going to say, stay in the cave, don't do anything new, don't do anything scary, don't do anything outside of our comfort zone. We would never grow, we would never evolve, we would never have new inventions, we would never have new anything because everybody would just stay the same. So valuable information. Okay, that we need to listen to and honor and take into account, but we can't let this one lead by itself. Same thing for the mammalian brain, for this emotional side of us. Okay, whenever we tap into what are we experiencing on an emotional level, this is data, this is information about our truest desires. This is information about what is tapping into our zone of genius. This is information about which path forward is actually going to work best for us based on how we are uniquely wired and what it is that we desire and our values and all of those kinds of things. The emotions becomes maps. It's sort of like a, warm or colder as to what's actually going to work for you. And when we disregard this, we end up creating a path forward that doesn't really work for us, that's going against our emotions, that requires a ton of willpower and eventually leads to burnout. So this information is vital for figuring out, if I'm at point A and I want to get to point B, making a plan and a path that actually works with who you are and who you are created to be in a way that is life-giving and energizing, as opposed to something that is an energy drain and eventually leads to burning out. Okay, so we need all of that information. But also we cannot let this part of the brain lead by itself, because one of the things that we know that is true of the limbic brain and the emotional brain is that it is motivated by three main things. And this is known as the motivational triad, which is seek pleasure, avoid pain, and conserve energy. Okay. And what this means is You may have a thing that you want to do and it actually is in alignment with everything that you want and you've done all the pre-work, but when you show right up to doing it, this part of your brain is usually going to say, nah, let's not, right? Because it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable and it's always concerned with feeling good in the moment. And that's a great compass, but it can miss out on the fact that sometimes what we have to do is something that is slightly uncomfortable in the moment for our long-term well-being. Okay, just the idea of like sometimes getting up the energy to like go do movement, to go do some sort of exercise doesn't always feel good right then, right? Because it's gonna be hard and we're gonna get sweaty and it's gonna take time and it's not conserving energy. It's doing the opposite of that, but it leads to more energy long term. It leads to greater mental health and greater strength and greater well-being. So great information, but again, can't be the leader, or we usually are going to get right up to the point of doing something and then bail for something that feels more comfortable momentarily. All right, then we've got our neocortex, this logical part of our brain. Now, this is part of what helps whenever we're in those moments, right? Whenever the emotional part of our brain is saying like, yeah, but that might feel kind of bad. Let's do this thing over here that feels good. This is the part of our brain that can come in and be like, right, but like, let's make plans. Let's understand how this works. Like, yeah, it's not going to feel great in this moment, but like, remember how good we feel after we do that. Remember how we have more energy and our brain is clearer and like we're less stressed and all of that stuff that comes afterwards. Yeah, it does feel bad right now. And it's worth it because this is a long-term well-being sort of thing. That ability to make plans and have follow through and think about not just how things feel right now, but how things are going to feel in the future is part of why we need this, okay? And it helps us do that long-term well-being where we are sometimes delaying gratification and we're taking massive action and we are moving through things and building in positive mindsets, right? We need all of that this part of the brain. But as I mentioned before, we also cannot only let this part of the brain lead because it completely disregards all of our emotional information and all of our safety information. And when I see people do this, it's like, okay, well, this makes sense, so I'll just do it. And they completely leave out what is actually true for them, who they are as a person, what actually gives them energy and what doesn't. I see them just push through blindly and they miss important information that would allow them to actually move forward in a way that took way less willpower, right? They miss the idea of like being able to create a life that is joyful and works for who they are as an individual, just based on, well, this was a plan and this is what somebody said and I'll just do this. We miss out on things like the fact that we are humans and we move in cycles and seasons, where logic might say, just work at the same level every single day and be very consistent. But the truth is that sort of thinking sometimes misses out on the fact that sometimes we have times where we want to be moving forward and sometimes we want to be resting, and that sometimes our stress levels are high and we need to pull back and rest. And logic can miss out on the information that we need to be healthy, whole human beings because it's just concerned with making a plan. Okay, so we also cannot let this part of our brain lead. So none of these parts of the brain should be the leader and the only thing leading. We do not want to be ruled by emotions. We don't want to stay in the cave our whole life. We don't want to only be logical and end up in burnout and in chronic health issues because we didn't pay attention to what everything was saying. No single one of them is going to be the leader, but every single one of them has valuable information that you need. So what I want to present to you is, can you come into partnership with these areas of your brain? You are the leader, okay? Your true self, your higher self, you're the one making decisions. And these are your partners. These are the committee. Here's a choice before me. What am I going to do? Lizard brain, what do you got to say? Mammalian brain, what do you got to say? Neocortex, what do you got to say? And this is your committee, and they give you the information and you say, thank you for the information. That's all really helpful from, hearing from everybody and from everybody's perspective, but then you still get to make the decision. Okay. And when you can understand that even if this part of your brain is saying, don't do it, it's unfamiliar, that doesn't mean we have to listen. We just have to understand what the motivation is. And when this one says like, definitely go do it and do the same thing every day. Okay, right, okay, there's that. And then this one's like, do it this way. All these parts of your brain have different intrinsic motivations, but they are all on team your well-being. Let them all have a voice, listen to them, but you be the leader. When you can do this, we don't have to choose between logical or being emotional. We understand that we are all always both and more. When we can honor and acknowledge all of these parts and let them come into partnership and then make a plan, you will get to where you are going so much quicker and with so much less pain, so much less struggle, so much less dependence on willpower, so much lower risk of burnout. Okay, we have all of these parts of the brain for a reason. Let them all come to the table. Let them all come to the meeting, but don't let any one of them lead. You be the leader.